I'd like to call to order the June 6th, 2022 Development Review Commission. I'd like to start with a roll call. Kat?
Shear.
Here.
Arthur.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
Silent.
Here.
Berardi.
Here.
Poinsett.
Here.
And Mr. Sangri is absent this evening.
Okay. First off, I'd like to thank you all for filling in for Randy and I in our absence. I appreciate it very much. And our first order of business is for our council update. Councilor Wedlin?
Yes.
The floor is yours.
Well, I haven't seen you guys in a while, so the presentation is only about an hour and a half tonight, so, no, I'm just kidding. Distinguished commissioners, thanks for having me here. It's always a pleasure to meet with you guys because I think this is one of the best polls of council assignments because I can't actually sit through the meeting because I may be deliberating as a council person, so I just give my report and leave. So your work is certainly appreciated, and I don't know everything about it until we get it up to the next level. So, but I do want to tell you that a lot of wonderful things have been happening in the city, and I wanted to highlight a few things. In May, we had an unusual presentation where we were able to recognize several of our firefighters and emergency response people and our LOCOM operators when we had a Medal of Valor and Unit Citation award ceremony for an accident that happened on Country Club when the car kind of flew. I don't know if you remember that. There was a car that ended up in somebody's second floor window, and the driver of the car was severely injured, and are collaboratively through different units of Lake Oswego, Tualatin, firefighters and responders, it came out as a positive, saved her life, and she's still in rehabilitation. But we had a very moving presentation by her mom who spoke on her behalf and just appreciated all the things that happened that night. There was bravery, and there was fire, and there was quick thinking, and I just mentioned that because oftentimes we see the fire department driving around in fire trucks and so on, but when the alarm happens and they respond, they do respond in force, and we had a very good outcome from that. And we usually don't do a whole medal ceremony, but we had the pleasure of doing that. Another fun thing that happened was our at the end of June, we I don't know if it's completely done yet, but we finalized everything that's going in the 2022 City Hall time capsule, which I don't know if you were here at a meeting, but we had all the different things that were going into the time capsule out on a table, and you would be surprised at how nostalgic people are going to be in. I think they say they're going to remove it when this building is demolished. So we may not be here, but we're hoping that this building lasts at least 50 to 70 years, so longer than the last City Hall. But it was very amusing to see some of the things that kind of time-stamped what the last few years have been. And in 2022, we did say that they should probably include a mask, face mask, but that wasn't on the original display. Something that actually happened, which I want to recognize, the many people in Lake Oswego will get to know this as you will in the House Bill 2001 and the whole change of the different density for our housing. That is on a horizon. It will be on your horizon because I know that you'll get to know all about that. we finished up what was about a 2-year process of engagement. And I want to compliment the staff and the volunteers on the different committees that served. I know Commissioner Arthur was on it. I know that we had several people on a steering committee. We had lots of people from Planning Commission, and then just tons and tons of time with our staff to figure out how Lake Oswego can interpret density to the best of our ability while still maintaining compliance to state law. And that's a very tricky, it's kind of like a 4-dimensional puzzle. But with just the ordinances that it affected, just the summary pages were, I don't know, 6 or 8 pages long of the types of different ordinances that we had to look at. And so, is it perfect? Probably not. Is it pretty close to what we want to do? I would say it is, because at the final hearing that we had for this, we had one person show up, and that person was actually complimentary of the process and the output. And that doesn't happen in Lake Oswego very often. So I just want to tell you that there are more things to come with it, and I know that some things will probably be coming before you as time goes on. Something else that we got updated on, a couple quick things. The American with Disabilities Act, we did a self-evaluation and are coming up with a plan for Lake Oswego of what needs to be done to adhere more to the ADA. One of the things that we do know is that it's a fairly large monetary number of things that we need to do, and that is in the development standpoint at this point. And over the past 18 months, a list was essentially, well, it was created from basically taking a complete survey of all of Lake Oswego, and I'm sure we missed some things, but we do have a list, and we need to show progress towards fixing it. It's not funded per se, but it will be funded over time, and it will be a long time until we get the list done. But it does give us a plan for us to follow. And I don't know if you'll be dealing with a number of those things, but there is the chance that it will come before the DRC in some way. And then we have we approved almost a $5.5 million annual pavement rehabilitation contract. So you'll be seeing more paved roads in Lake Oswego this summer. And for the most part, that will complete our big push for the pavement resurfacing off. We passed a bond a few years ago, and what happened with that money is we kind of front-loaded projects to try to get our paving index and our roads up to a higher index number. And so now we'll be paying that back with funds that we get from our gas and registration taxes. And then the only other thing that I wanted to say is that we are about to have interviews for the boards and commissions this next month. And I wanted to call out to all of you. Like City Council, we're all volunteers, and I just want to tell you that we appreciate your voluntary participation in the city government that we have. Some of you may be up for a term, but I know some of you will be reapplying, and we'll be going through interviews in the month of June and making the, as people roll off of different commissions, we'll have new people come on. But I do know that volunteer work is supposed to be fun and some challenging, and sometimes you guys are in the crosshairs of people that want something, and so you have double duty of your volunteer part where you're actually making decisions, and it's not always easy decisions, whereas we have some commissions that are more fun-oriented. So feel free to interview and sign up for those if this is, if you've gone through a couple terms here. So anyway, that's the report for City Council.
Are there any questions of our esteemed counselor?
I just wanted to thank you, Councilor Winland, for that good report. And I particularly appreciated the City Council taking up and working on the middle housing code upgrade issues and addressing the definition of demolition, which I think is an issue that's been under discussion for a long time. So I really appreciated that.
Yeah, and demolition we're doing that in a three-phase sort of approach. We're trying to get the size of demolition and then what will be, what kind of numerical amount it is, and then finally with passing something that everybody can live with. So anyway, great.
Well, thank you very much. I know you spend a lot of time outside of council meetings reading and studying and prepping for meetings. I appreciate your volunteerism very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Okay, now we have the minutes from May 16th, 2022. Did everybody take a look at them? Are there any changes? I would entertain a motion.
Move to approve the minutes as submitted.
Second.
Thank you. Kat, could you poll the council?
Shear,
Abstain.
Arthur,
I'm abstaining as well. Thank you.
Smith,
Yes.
Stylen,
Yes.
Berardi,
Yes.
Poinsett,
Yes.
4-0.
Okay, thank you. We approve the minutes. Now we move to item 5, findings. Our first finding is LU 22-0011. The applicant proposes to reconstruct the River Grove Elementary School, requiring approval of the following: a development review permit for the new buildings, a conditional use permit modification to increase the size of the building from approximately 67,600 square feet to 84,000 square feet, and to increase the capacity of the school from 575 students to 600 students. A request for a major variance to LOC 50.006.001.5.G.II, parentheses 1, requiring buildings to have a public entrance within 30 feet of the public roadway, and the removal of 17 trees to accommodate the project. The additional trees will be removed under separate invasive tree removal permits. This site is located at 5850 McEwen Road, 21E 041 9BA 00300. The staff coordinator was Ellen Davis, Associate Planner. Evan.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. For the Commission's information, the staff has received a communication from the Rosewood Neighborhood Association challenging for bias one of the commissioners. And I think the process for that before a final vote and deliberation would be to hear the allegation to that bias. The commissioner can then respond to that if they wish to do so, and then we'll take the deliberation and vote. The decision whether or not the commissioner participates in the decision is not a commission decision, it's an individual commissioner decision, but we want to put that on the record. Okay, so with that, I would ask if there's a representative of the Rosewood Neighborhood Association.
Thanks, Evan. My name is Peter Clavey. I'm chair of the Rosewood Neighbourhood Association. I was a little disappointed at the DRC meeting, the hearing last time. I felt like there was some prejudgment actually made by all of the commissioners because there was no deliberation on any of the issues that I brought up or that were written by about 35 members of the public to the committee. But there was one kind of, it was almost an innocuous comment that was made by Commissioner Berardi immediately after the testimony by the the applicant, the school district. And he said it was a pity that the tree in question couldn't be saved or couldn't be used to make a park bench. And just the timing of that statement suggested that he'd already made up his mind. And I think, Commissioner, truly speaking, you probably ought to abstain from the voting on that, because you'd indicated that you thought the tree was going to go before you'd heard all the testimony.
Thank you. Commissioner Berardi, do you wish to put any comment on the record?
Yeah, and I didn't use the word pity. I made the comment about mediation. Has there been anything with the homeowners association about mediation, possible use in some other way? But I'll abstain from the vote, make it easy. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. The commission may proceed with deliberation on the final findings and vote.
Okay.
I have a question. There is a discussion on whether or not somebody believes that we have a bias when we talk about who we are and what we do and things of that nature. Is the statement now that and there was no statement as to bias at that point.
That's correct.
So now they're saying between that statement and before deliberation, the bias occurred?
Well, they're stating, yes. The statement is that the evidence of the bias arose after that declaration time was following the completion of the applicant's testimony, and then we had the opponent's testimony and the tentative decision for deliberation. I do think that a party should bring those forward as promptly as possible, which would be at the time of the objection to do so. But I think it's also, I don't think it's in the heat of the moment, if you will. A person has to consider the bias allegation plus present the evidence on the testimony. Before Commissioner Berardi were to take a vote on it, he can consider what he wants to do. I think they can put that on the record.
So without Commissioner Berardi voting, and we have two other people that are abstaining, do we have enough to take a vote and pass it?
The requirement is that a majority of those present and eligible to vote must approve it. So if there are Mr. Berardi abstaining, and two objections, so there would be at 3, is that your count? Then the question is whether majority of those present and eligible, well, the 3, would adopt it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the findings for LU 22-0011? Kurt?
I move that we approve the findings for LU 22-0011.
Bruce?
Second.
Thank you. Kat, could you poll us?
Shear,
Abstain.
Arthur,
I'm abstaining, thank you.
Smith,
Yes.
Silent,
Yes.
Berardi,
Abstain.
Poinsett.
Yes.
Thank you. The findings pass. Now we go on to findings for LU 22-0003, a request for a development review permit for 3 new mixed-use office and residential buildings in the West Lake Grove Design District and a removal of trees. The site is located at 16524 and 16556 Boones Ferry Road, designated 21E07DD02300 and 21E07DD02500. The staff coordinator is Evan Franston, senior planner. Are there any thoughts on this one? Kurt?
I move that we approve the findings for LU 22-0003.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Kat?
Shear,
Abstain?
Arthur,
Abstain.
Smith,
Yes.
Stylen,
Yes.
Birdy,
Yes.
Poinsett.
Yes.
Thank you, it passes. Okay, now we go to the public hearing. The public hearing is on AP 22-02, parentheses 499-22-0000303-tree. A request for a hearing appealing the staff's decision approving a type 2 tree application 499-22-000303 tree to remove a 15-inch Norway spruce and a 50-inch Douglas fir for construction of a new single-family dwelling on the site. The site is located at 19175 Pilkington Road. Designate 21E19BA02900. Staff coordinator is Daphne Sissel. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Associated planner.
And Mr.
Evan.
Chairman, I'll proceed with the hearing procedure. The tree removal hearing is to be considered based on the applicable criteria and standards. The staff report lists the criteria and that staff identified as applicable to the request. It was available online and available at from the planning department. Testimony and evidence must be directed towards the applicable criteria, and we ask that you identify to the commission the criteria or standards you're addressing so the commission may consider that testimony in relation to the criteria or standards. If you do not identify the criteria or standards that you're addressing, the commission is not obliged to guess which standards or criteria you're addressing, and it may not consider your testimony in its decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the commission the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the city council based on that issue. The hearing process will be as follows. First, a presentation by staff, then testimony by the applicant, up to 20 minutes, then testimony by the parties in support of the application, followed by testimony by parties opposed to the application, and finally, testimony by those neither for nor against the application. Individuals will be allowed up to 5 minutes. Any person in attendance may cede his or her time for testimony to another person, but in no case shall any person's testimony be increased to greater than 10 minutes. Recognized neighborhood associations, government or government agencies, or other incorporated public interest organizations will be allowed up to 10 minutes. Following that would be the applicant's rebuttal up to 5 minutes, and then commission deliberation, including a statement to the applicant by the commission of any proposed conditions of approval different than contained in the staff report, and the applicant's response to the commission's conditions of approval proposed following commission deliberation. Now, those time limits do not include time spent responding to questions from the commission. Testimony by attorneys, representatives, and witnesses on behalf of or which are part of the presentation by a person shall be counted within that person's time limit. It is assumed that a person is testifying on their own behalf unless they expressly identify the recognized neighborhood association, government or government agency, or other incorporated public interest organization they are representing. As stated in the public notice, the deadline for submission of written materials was noon today. No written materials may be submitted to the commission tonight. Any person, a potential conflict of interest declared on behalf of each of the DRC members to the extent of their business or employment, which each will identify. Unless declared otherwise, the respective DRC member does not have a known, present, or anticipated future business relationship with the project or the applicant. It is possible that a future business relationship could arise in the initiation, design, construction, or maintenance of the project through either the employment or business of the DRC member personally or through a relative as defined in ORS 244-020. At this point, I would ask the commissioners please declare if you've had any ex parte contacts, including a site visit, if you have any bias on the application, if you have any financial conflicts of interest, and please declare your business or employment. Commissioner Berardi.
Yep, my name is Craig Berardi. I'm a project management consultant with Northwest Pipe. I have not visited the site. I have no ex parte contacts, no bias, and no financial conflicts of interest.
I am Bruce Poinsett. Oops, turned it off. I'm Bruce Poinsett, GEW Safety Consultants. I have no bias, no interest, no future financial gains, nothing whatsoever to conflict.
My name is Kirk Smith. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Buckhalter. I do real estate and land use there. The city provided me with a list of parties, including the appellant and the applicant's consultants. I've run these names through our conflict system and determined that I do not have a conflict I've not visited the site. I don't have any ex parte contacts, no bias, no additional financial conflicts of interest.
My name is Jeff Shear. I'm a retired contractor. I've not made a specific site visit. I've had no ex parte contacts. I have no bias and no financial conflicts of interest.
I'm Randy Arthur. I'm a civil litigation attorney with the Portland office of Bullivan Hauser Bailey. I've made no ex parte visit to the site. I have no disqualifying bias, no financial interest or other interest in the application.
My name is Mark Silent. I work for the Intuit Corporation. I have not made a site visit. I've not had any ex parte contact. I do not have any bias about this application, and I have no financial conflict of interest.
Thank you. Is there any challenge to Commissioner's right to consider the application? Seeing none, Associate Planner Daphne Sissel with the staff report.
Thank you. Good evening, Commission members. My name is Daphne Sissel, and I'm an Associate Planner here with the City of Lake Oswego. First, I would like to add into the record Exhibit G-209, which you should have received on June 3rd. The comment brought up concerns about erosion control installation at the property in regards to another tree on site, not the trees on this tree, type 2 tree application. Code enforcement staff was informed of the concern and they'll be following up on that. The comment also reiterated previous submitted comments in opposition to the removal of one of the trees, and I'll be addressing type 2 removal criteria in the presentation. So this type 2 tree application is for 19175 Pilkington Road, as previously stated. It's for 2 trees. One of them is tree 24. It's down here on the southern property line. It's a 15-inch Norway spruce. And the other tree is tree 26. It's a 51-inch Douglas fir that straddles the property line of the subject property and Pilkington Road. Both trees must meet all type 2 removal criteria, but all the comments received were in regards to the 51-inch Douglas fir. So my presentation will focus on this tree. As stated, type 2 tree removal applications must meet Lake Oswego Code requirements, criterion 1 through 3 as listed in LOC 55.02.080. Criterion 1 is the reason for removal. Type 2 trees requested for removal must be for either development or landscaping reasons. Tree 26 is requested to be removed in order to comply with a condition of approval to meet Clackamas County site distance requirements for LU 21-0029, which was a 2-lot partition. Staff finds this criterion is met. Criterion 2 addresses tree removal impacts on erosion, surface water, and windbreaks for adjacent trees. Based on materials submitted with the application and the city's contract arborist assessment, staff finds that this criterion is also met. Criterion 3 addresses tree removal impacts on the character or aesthetics of the neighborhood. This standard is met if the removal of the trees does not involve a significant tree, alterations to distinctive features or continuity of the neighborhood skyline, trees serving as a visual screen between different neighborhood zonings, a street tree, or removal of 50% or more of a stand of trees. Tree 26, the 51-inch Douglas fir, was found to be significant to the neighborhood due to size and because it is a street tree. You can see in this photo, it is located along Pilkington Road. It straddles the property line, like I said earlier. And Pilkington Road is under the jurisdiction of Clackamas County, and the removal is required to meet the county's site distance requirements for the driveway. As such, an acceptance to criterion 3 is required since the tree is significant. For site distance requirements for LU 21-0029, Clackamas County's roadway standards requires that adequate intersection site distance be met for all accesses onto Clackamas County roadways. Pilkington Road is classified as a 2-lane collector with a speed limit of 30 miles per hour, which requires a site distance of 335 feet to the north of the driveway, based on a 14.5-foot setback from the traveled way. Site distance from the proposed driveway was verified in the field by Lake Oswego engineering staff and found that tree 26 limits site distance to just 90 feet. As such, Clackamas County is requiring tree 26 be removed to meet site distance requirements. The city traffic engineer reviewed whether reasonable alternatives exist to retain the tree and comply with site distance requirements. Reducing the setback from the traveled way was measured at a 12-foot setback instead of 14 and a half feet, which increased the site distance to 160 feet, which is still well below the 335 feet required by Clackamas County. Using the same reduced setback of 12 feet and shifting the proposed driveway south only increased the site distance to 245 feet. Again, still below the required 335. Staff recommendation is that staff finds the approval criteria of LOC 55.02.080 have been met, specifically the exception to Criterion 3, because there are no reasonable alternatives. Staff recommends approval of the Type 2 tree removal application subject to the following conditions of approval. The stump of tree 26 shall be removed by stump grinding and shall not be extracted completely from the ground to protect the root system of an adjacent redwood. And prior to the final building inspection for a new dwelling, the applicant or owner shall plant 3 native species mitigation trees. Thank you. This concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Before we go around, I have one that's been bothering me. The tree is in Lake Oswego because the property line, you know, I saw, and I've talked to staff about River Grove being interested in this tree. Did the applicant pull the pins, and is there a way to see if the tree is in Lake Oswego or part of it's in Lake Oswego? Or does it matter?
The applicant did provide a survey as part of the partition application.
I didn't see it in the packet.
Yeah, it was part of the partition application. We do have a survey, so we do know that it does straddle the front property line, and which puts it, unfortunately, in 2 different jurisdictions, both the city of Lake Oswego as well as the city of River Grove. Obviously, what's before you tonight are the city of Lake Oswego standards. The applicant has been advised that if there is tree permit required from the city of River Grove, they will also need to obtain a permit from them as well. But that is not before you tonight. What's before you tonight is whether it complies with the city of Lake Oswego tree code criteria.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we all understood that. Okay, anybody have any questions? Craig?
I was going along the same line. You know, we're in the city.
Turn your mic on.
I'm sorry. We're commissioners of the city, and there's a Clackamas standard that's being quoted. So I'm confused about that. There's a Clackamas standard being quoted on Sightline, and that's not our code, right?
Yeah, this is right at the boundary of several different jurisdictions. So the roadway along the site frontage, Pilkington Road, is under the jurisdiction of Clackamas County. It's also in the city of River Grove, but Clackamas County has the authority over the improvements to the road and maintenance, et cetera. As part of the partition, when you create a new lot, you're required to mitigate the impacts of the additional lot. And so as part of a partition, as many of you are aware, particularly if you've reviewed subdivisions, we require typically mitigations. That could include things like constructing a sidewalk or an asphalt pathway or right-of-way dedication, et cetera. So the city did not have jurisdiction to do that, those exactions, but the county did. And so we consult with the county, and the county is the one who makes the roadway improvements to mitigate the impacts of the additional lot.
So is that why their vision standards are ours different than theirs?
Ours do differ from theirs a little bit. We both use AASHTO standards. Okay. However, how you apply some of the standards, there is some difference. So in this case, we did not apply the city site distance standards. It's the county site distance standards that were applied to that partition.
Okay.
I would just, I guess, add from the lawyer's analysis on it. The partition determined that the county standards applied, the county access standards applied, and that was imposed, that compliance was thus imposed a condition of approval. The question tonight is whether or not the removal of the tree is necessary for development purposes. Well, we looked to the partition approval. That was a decision that was noticed, opportunity for comment, not appealed. So we feel, staff feels that the decision in the partition, it sort of answers the question about which development standard applies, and that is the development standard they need to comply with. And so then the question tonight is, in order to comply with the development standard, are there, is it being removed for development purposes? Yes, to meet the development standard. Next question is it a significant tree? If it is, and all those standards, then there's the reasonable alternatives to that.
Thank you, Evan. Bruce? Kirk? Mark? No? Randy?
I just had a question to clarify application of the reasonable alternative standards. It's my understanding, rightly or wrongly, that in some circumstances, you look at whether the alternatives have been limited by actions or decisions of the applicant. When we look at alternative standards, are we supposed to may we take into account whether the applicant has caused or limited the alternatives that are reasonable, if that's the evidence?
It sounds to me like you're imposing a major variance. And we look at that for a major variance, and that's not what's being requested tonight. The only question—
No, I understand that. I'm just asking if that gloss is to be applied in interpreting whether there have been alternative reasonable standards applied here.
Well, the question is, what are the reasonable alternatives? And if you find, I suppose, that the applicant precluded the opportunity for reasonable alternatives, then I suppose you could take that into account. Yeah, we haven't, made that. That's an interesting question, and the commission has not had to wrestle with that before, but I suppose that's a reasonable interpretation of what is a reasonable alternative, is not to be foreclosed by the applicant.
And I just wanted to ask staff, has the 2-parcel minor petition been completed at this point?
It has been approved, and it is in the stage now where they're looking at putting together their final plat, complying with their conditions of approval, and this is one of the conditions of approval. At the time when they submitted their site distance analysis, the applicant was not intending to remove the tree. Certainly, the city did not want the tree to be removed either, but it was found during the review that it didn't comply. And so a condition was imposed that, because typically we would look at the tree removal as part of that land use, but since they didn't show that it complied at the time that they submitted, we had to impose a condition of approval for them to get the tree removal after the fact.
And so the petition has not been completed at this point?
No, the plat has not been recorded.
Right, but the final decision on that is done.
Correct.
And who controls whether the plat is recorded?
The applicant.
Thanks, I have no other questions.
So, if the tree permit is approved, the plat can be recorded.
There are a number of conditions that have to be completed, but that is one of them, yes.
So it isn't contingent on whatever River Grove does?
No.
Right.
This whole 2 city county thing, in my mind, I haven't got it straightened out yet.
Right. The tree removal permits,
Yeah.
a person applies for those so that when they remove the tree,
Yes.
they are not committing a violation. Okay? I would want to get a tree removal permit to basically shield myself, okay,
Right.
from a subsequent enforcement action for removing a tree. So it's, as Planning Manager Namanulu indicated, it's not really, the dual jurisdictional question is not really a question for the commission. Is a part of the tree that would be removed within the jurisdiction of the city? If it is, then you have jurisdiction to hear the case.
Right.
But it is not an exclusive determination, but it is up to the applicant then, before that person were to actually, the tree, to make sure they have all requisite approvals. They've got one from Lake Oswego then, if that's the case. They need to make sure they have one from River Grove, but that's up to them.
Okay, so that, if they comply with all the contingencies for the plat, they can plat it here, and we don't care whether they get a tree permit or not.
Right, that would be an enforcement action. I mean,
For River Grove.
if they didn't get one, we would still go through with the plat.
Yeah.
It would be up to River Grove to decide whether to enforce,
Okay,
and if
I get
so,
it.
what the penalties of that are.
Got it. Okay, any other questions? All right, now we'll hear from the applicant. You have 20 minutes. Is the applicant here?
Hi.
Hello.
My name is Kari Kubayama. I am representing the applicant. I am with WDY Engineering, and I'm the civil engineer on this project. I did send a couple of slides over. But so pretty much we're talking about this 50-inch diameter tree fronting Pilkington Road. And so what was mentioned earlier is that it does straddle, to our understanding, it does straddle the Lake Oswego and City of River Grove. But the access is off Pilkington, which is a county road. And so we have to follow county access standards as part of that. And so Pilkington is a county urban collector road. And, we have cars traveling, bikes, either traveling on the in the roadway or on the shoulders, and then also pedestrians, as there are no sidewalks in this area. And so we have to be a little cognizant of that. And so the county does follow AASHTO standards, and so typically that'll be 14 feet behind the edge of traveled roadway, which in this case is the fog line along Pilkington. And so our proposed driveway is in about the same area as the current driveway. Moving it anywhere else, as what was mentioned earlier, if we moved it further south, there still wouldn't be enough vision clearance. And then moving it further north, we would also we may have issues also with another very large tree to the north on our site as well. And we also risk, we won't have enough sight distance looking south. And so, I think this driveway placement in this current location is the best area. And so in this slide here is, pretty much what was previously said earlier, where we're looking at 14.5 feet from the fog line. And so I have someone standing there at 290 feet. And so I can see them. And so if the tree weren't there, this standard would be met. And this 290 is based on the conditions of approval that the county has imposed on this project. And so, as you can see, I can only see, about 90 feet clear from this. And then I moved a little bit further north, and I can, in the same area, and I still would not meet the clear zone required. And now I for sure can't see, we had our person standing, at the maximum site distance required, or the minimum site distance required. And then here, I am 8.5 feet from the fog line, and I literally have to be past, my face has to be literally past this tree. And so we're talking about, me pretty much at the face of the fog line, the front of my car at the face of the fog line. And for me to be, see down the road to the 290 feet to the north. And this is just 8.5 feet is going a little, it's not per, policies, typical policies, just because, and especially because we have, cars and bikes and pedestrians that we gotta look for, it's going against typical policy, I don't think would be prudent in this kind of situation, just because we don't know, how a typical driver will act and react. And so that's pretty much my presentation on kind of why this standard had, or why, we initially think that this tree should be removed based on this first criteria 1 for meeting the conditions of approval for our site for the intersection site distance.
Thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
questions? Sure.
Maybe you can clarify this for me. You're looking out 290 feet, and yet we heard that the requirement was 345 feet. So that raises for this gentleman a confusion. Can you clarify that?
Yes. So as part of, let's see, we're following Clackamas County rules. And so as part of our conditions of approval, the Clackamas County has said that their minimum requirement looking north is 290 lineal feet. And then looking south would be that 330.
Thank you.
Randy?
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to follow up on one of your comments. Did I understand, if I understood correctly, one of your comments was that you had given some analysis to moving the driveway placement north, and you indicated, however, that you may have issues involving another tree. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so further north, there's another tree. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think it is larger than this tree. So I think it's a 60-inch diameter tree. And so there would be site distances issues looking north and south.
And did you do an analysis of that tree as you've done with this one?
Not to the same level, but I believe that because the tree is larger, and we also wouldn't get enough site distance looking south, we would have either the same issue or even worse, meaning like you would have to take another tree out. And so I believe, this current location would be the best location.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, now, I don't have anybody signed. Has anybody else signed up, Kat, to speak in favor of the application? Nobody else in favor. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so now we will hear from parties opposed to the application. Our first one is Peter Calby. Levy? Sorry about that.
My name is Peter Klebe. I'm the chair of the Rosewood Neighbourhood Association. I just have a procedural question for Evan. beforehand, just some of the questions back and forth between the commissioners and you. So if the DRC doesn't approve this tree permit, can the plat be recorded?
I believe that's a condition of approval for recording, so it cannot be.
So it's, the petition has to, the plat has to be, the tree permit has to be approved for the plat to be recorded, is what you're telling me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Peter, I have a question for you. Are you testifying for yourself or on behalf of the neighborhood association?
I'm testifying on behalf of the Neighbourhood Association.
So you would have 10 minutes. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
So the staff report, I've got 4 points I want to raise. The staff report considers that tree number 26, the 51-inch DBH Doug fir, is significant due to its size, and the interpretation of the DRC appeal case AP 1705, that a 45-inch diameter brass tree, 45-inch tree, let's just call it that, is not significant in and of itself due to size, but it does suggest that a 46-inch diameter tree is significant due to size, and thankfully we agree with the staff that this tree is significant due to its size. That's the first point. The second point, we disagree with the staff report that the tree does not provide wind protection for the 60-inch giant sequoia, which is next in line to the north of this Doug fir. As most of you probably know, the really strong winds that topple trees and fell large branches typically come from the south here. We find that LOC 5502-080 number 2 does apply as it refers to windbreak, and the staff report ignores this. Then the next point I want to raise is with the site distance requirements. Per the city's traffic engineer's report from May this year, on page 1 of Exhibit F006, Clackamas County's roadway standards section 240.2.c requires adequate intersection site distance to be provided at all new accesses, and I'm emphasising the word new accesses. This is an existing driveway that is on an existing house that is going to be demolished and rebuilt, and the driveway is basically going to be co-located on the same location as the existing driveway. I actually went out and looked at the county's roadway standard, and I just want to quote from you this quote. It says, adequate intersection site distance and adequate stopping site distance per tables 26, 2728 should be provided at all proposed accesses and existing accesses that are subject to land use approval that increase in ADT, which is average daily traffic, by 21 or more. This is not a new access. This is an existing driveway. It's going to be rebuilt as a paved driveway. A single-family residence does not typically increase the average daily trips by 21 vehicle movements per day. Hence, we don't believe that these ISD requirements do apply. Hence my question to you earlier, Evan. Even if you do consider that, this is my last point, even if you do consider that intersection site distance requirements apply, which we don't believe they do, the staff report on page 9 found that speeds lower than 25 miles per hour would meet the ISD requirements. Lowering the speed to 25 miles per hour on this section of Pilkington Road between McEwen and Childs would satisfy this requirement. And, you know, whether that's a reasonable alternative, personally, I don't want to see the speed limit lowered to 25. I think it's hard enough to get around Lake Oswego as it is with some of our speed limits, but there are people in my neighbourhood association that would recommend that we do that rather than cut down this one tree. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you. Jennifer Davies.
Good evening. My name is Jenny Davies. I live at 18641 Benfield Avenue in the Rosewood neighborhood, not less than a fourth mile from this tree. I don't really have anything to add from what Peter said. I just want to emphasize that the Clackamas County Roadway Standard Section 240.2 subsection C does not apply here. It only applies to all new accesses This is not a new access. The proposed driveway redo is in the exact same place as the existing driveway. So there will be no change in the traffic that's coming and going from Pilkington in and out of this driveway. That part of the Clackamas County roadway standards sections requires that the ISD be met for all new axes. It also states that it should be required for existing accesses. So it's not required here because this tree is significant because of its size and its location. And I also agree with Peter because it is a windscreen. It's not reasonable to remove this tree because it's not required. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? No? Okay. Kat? Lauren, is she, I don't see anybody else. Is she online? Evan, do we move on or do we?
We move on.
We move on.
Did she sign up to be online, Kat? Well, it probably doesn't make a whole lot of difference. If a person signs up to be online and they're not online,
Then we move on.
we move on, just as
Okay.
if they had showed up or, said they were going to show up but didn't.
Okay, very good. So now we move on to parties that are nor against the application. Neither for or against the application, but there are no one here. So it would be now time for the applicant's rebuttal. Okay, you don't want to say anything, okay, very good. Post-hearing opportunities, Evan?
The only other one is, does the applicant wish to submit final written argument which would delay the commission's decision? Or do you wish to proceed based upon the evidence and argument the commission has received? Okay, proceed ahead, Mr. Chair, for deliberation.
Well, let me ask you a question, Evan. Could the applicant not remove the tree and still build the house?
No, because in order to build the house, well, I don't know the state of the land, but
No,
if there's a partition, we're
I
talking
mean,
about.
the driveway's in the same location.
Right,
All they're doing is paving it. It's there now.
okay. But if
So they have to bring it up to code.
you can't put two houses on a lot, okay?
Okay.
All right, so in order to put the two houses on a lot, you have to complete the partition.
Okay,
The condition of the partition is, as determined in the partition proceeding, was that the requirement is that the tree be addressed, the access visibility of the tree be removed. So
why?
why? Because the Clackamas County standard requires that the visibility, that you meet the access standard. I mean, that's what was determined in the prior proceeding, okay?
Okay, my question was, it's there now.
Right.
They're working around it. But I get it when you remodel.
But when you remodel and partition.
You got to bring it up to, okay.
Right.
All right, I just wanted to
Right.
make sure that was the case here.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Kurt?
I have a question of City Attorney. There's a comment that we could change the speed limit from 35 to 25. Wouldn't the county be in control of the speed limit, not the city?
Well, there's a comment they'd like you to change the speed limit. You don't have authority to set speed limits on particularly county roads, even on city roads. So that's up to in the city, that's up to the city engineer, but this is it's a county road.
County road, so county would
term.
control what speed that road is.
County controls the speed. Right?
Thank you.
And I guess I would say that the ability to set speed, as commissioners may know, there is criteria for that, and it isn't whether or not one property needs to have access, type of thing. So So I don't think the commission has authority to change the speed limit on the county road. That's the bottom line.
Thank you. Thank you.
Jeff,
Yes, sir.
also a question for the city attorney. If there's a theory that's been put forward that since the driveway is going to be where the driveway exists now, that means that the Clackamas County requirements are not a requirement. Wouldn't it be?
Well, I disagree with that.
Well, that theory has been put forward.
Okay, that's the theory.
So
yes.
my question is, wouldn't it be reasonable to get the opinion of Clackamas County vis-a-vis that objection, if you will, prior to this commission making a decision?
Well,
we are being
yeah.
Put into a very interesting spot.
From my position, from the lawyer's position, the applicability of the county standard was an issue before that application. That application was reviewed at public notice. People had an opportunity to comment. A condition of approval was proposed and put on it. Said you had to comply with the county standard. In order to do that, you have to remove the tree. And so that decision is final, and this is an attempt to collaterally attack that decision, which I think is outside the scope of the application. We do not use the tree code to litigate the partition standards.
Thank you.
Any discussion?
Well, I did have a question. So with respect to the no reasonable alternative exemption, if we find that that has not been met, are we still able to approve the application?
If you find that the applicant has not shown that there is, if you find that the applicant has not carried the burden of showing that they have considered reasonable alternatives, okay, then that would not be an exception to criteria 3. And if you find that criteria 3 is applicable due to the size of the tree, okay, that's one of the significances. I think I've said before, we have too many significances in the tree code, okay? But if criteria 3, if they haven't shown that none of the standards or the elements in criteria 3, one of which is significance due to size, is not present, so that thus they find it is present, and that's the problem. The criteria speaks in a double negative, okay? Then the applicant has not shown that criteria 3 is met, and then you would not approve the application.
So on the staff report on page 9, the reference is alternatives to the tree removal have been considered and no reasonable alternative exists. Is that what the statute says? I have that statute in front of me, but the phrase is no reasonable alternative exists.
The standard on page 9 is in italics, so that's the statute. I mean, that's the code provision. Alternatives have been considered and no reasonable alternative exists to allow the property to be used as permitted in the zone. You can consider alternative site plans, et cetera, but those alternatives must allow the applicant to continue to comply with other provisions like Oswego Code. Okay, so if alternatives have been, the staff found that alternatives had been considered and that no reasonable alternative exists. It's the applicant's burden to show that. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Any comments? Randy?
Well, the impression I had from reading the staff report and from the discussion and testimony is that the reason, I believe it's tree 26, needs to be removed is because the applicant has applied for and gotten approval for a partition of the lot. And that's something in the applicant's control. And as I understand City Attorney Boone's insight and interpretation, if that fact that there's no reasonable alternative existing is within the control of the applicant, that's a factor I can take into account. So I think that I am going to take into account that the whole reason that we need to remove the tree is because the applicant is requesting to partition the land, which is within the applicant's control, which process has not yet been completed. So those are thoughts I have in mind in deliberating on the application.
Mr. Chair, may I, since you're basing your decision based upon your interpretation, I want to be.
Well, I was going with what you,
Right.
me, I thought you had said earlier, relating it to a hardship
Right.
variance.
The hardship, right.
And you said, as I understood it, and please clarify, I had understood you to say that the commission could take into account whether the hardship, not a hardship, whether the fact that there was no reasonable alternative existing was within the control of the applicant.
True, but it's no reasonable alternative exists to allow the property to be used as permitted in the zone. Well, what's permitted in the zone, the applicant has a ability to partition the property. I mean, that is a ability provided in the code to partition if they meet the standards to do so. So it almost, we have not said that a person has to reduce their density. You know, they have a statute, if they have a code right for density, they have a right for that density. So I think if the applicant has met the criteria for the partition, and I mean, this is where you may differ on it. Maybe they haven't met the criteria for the partition, because I think you may be relitigating, in my opinion, the access standard. So.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification.
Anybody else? Craig?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote a comment when all the presentation was going on about.
Mike.
Whoops, sorry. That I just haven't seen evidence in the presentation that options were eliminated. You know, we've had similar presentations and someone's shown pictures and trees and, you know, measurements and documents to prove that there is no other. I haven't seen that. All I'm seeing is just a picture from one side of this tree. So that's, and the second thing is just there's multiple government agencies, and I think seems like we're in the middle of this thing. So those are the two things on my mind right now. Sorry, those are the two things on my mind, sorry.
Thanks, Bruce.
The only thing I was really looking at was the ability to see oncoming traffic. Concern. That's about it. Nothing adverse at this point. It's kind of sketchy.
Kurt?
So when I read the staff report, as we were going through the analysis, it was, you know, this is a big tree, it's a significant tree based on size, and I was tracking all that, and then I got to the part where, well, it doesn't meet the sight lines, and so because of this big significant tree, from my perspective, is in the location that it's in, the sight lines, it's like basically you can't come out of this property whether or not it's, I mean, theoretically, whether or not the property is subdivided or not subdivided, there's a tree that blocks sight lines. And so if they've met all the criteria for a partition, and as part of the partition, the tree needs to be removed for sight lines, from my perspective, I would love to be able to keep the tree, but if we keep the tree, then either cars or people or bicycles or pedestrians or little children or may get injured because there's a big tree there. So that's, I guess, my perception that because there's a tree there and they met everything else with respect to the partition, then would I like to keep the tree? Absolutely, but if they have other rights to partition, then the tree has to come down. So.
Okay, thank you. Sure. Gentlemen? My own opinion is much like Kirk's. They've complied with the ability to partition the lot. County sent the sight line for their ASHTO standards. I think staff is correct in allowing them to cut the tree. I'd rather save the tree. I think the applicant showed that there would be more problems if we moved the driveway to the north. They'd have another tree, probably have to take down 2 trees rather than 1. Maybe we could have had some pictures of that and been able to visualize that better, but I have to believe the engineer at her word that that would create more problems, and I know the city would have looked into that, and I'm sure they did. And from my opinion is I agree with staff. I would entertain a motion.
So am I correct, Evan, that we are voting on the appeal and whether or not to grant the appeal, which is contrary to the staff's decision?
I think I never focus too much on the appeal nature of it because it gets into a double negative type of thing. I think the question is whether to grant the tree removal permit or to deny the tree removal permit. That's pretty clear.
So if we grant the, I'm sorry, it struck me when I was doing my conflicts, it's like the applicant is the property owner that got the city's approval to remove the tree, but then we're here for a hearing based on an appeal.
Yeah, and the tree code is imprecise in that as well, because also it asks, in order to get this here, you request a hearing. You request an evidentiary hearing, because there's no prior evidentiary hearing. So the appeal is just of a staff decision, but this is the first evidentiary hearing.
A tentative staff decision.
Yeah, tentative staff decision. Okay, thank you.
So it becomes final if no appeal or request for hearing is filed. But if one is filed, then it's not a final decision. The DRC will make the final decision. So you are just making a decision on whether to approve the application essentially or deny it.
Okay, so if I move, so I'd be moving either to grant the permit to remove the tree or deny the permit to remove the tree.
Yeah, I think
okay,
that's clear.
thank you.
That's clear then the commission and the public.
Okay, so I move that we grant the application to remove the tree based on the sightline requirements.
Second.
Thank you. Kat?
Shear?
Yes.
Arthur?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Silent?
No.
Berardi?
No.
Poinsett?
Yes.
4-2.
Motion passes.
All right, that's a tentative decision, and written findings will be brought back to the commission on
June 20th,
at
7 p.m.
Okay, our next order of business is, first off, excuse me, I'd like to thank you all for coming tonight and participating in our process. I appreciate it very much. Schedule review and management update. I understand we have some updates.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The next hearing will be on June 20th. Of course, we'll have the findings for this evening's decision, a tentative decision. And in addition, we will have technically 3 items scheduled for the June 20th meeting. The first item is a major variance, which is pretty limited. It's to remove a fencing requirement for a flag lot. And the next 2 appeals are for tree cutting permits in First Edition, Forest Hills. And it is an interesting situation because there are 2 lots, they're side by side, same applicant and owner, building new single-family dwellings on both lots. But a lot of the comments and testimony that were received, people kind of consolidated their comments and they wanted to talk about them together. So, but technically they're two separate lots with two separate applications. So one of the things that I would like the commission to address so that we have clear direction that we can include in the notice that we send out 10 days ahead of time, as well as on the agenda, is to how the hearing will be conducted. And what staff is recommending is that we will go ahead and have separate staff reports for each lot and separate findings once the DRC makes its decision. But we would suggest that you consolidate the hearing so that folks can testify on both applications at one time. We will have a site plan that clearly shows each lot and the numbered trees so that people can specify their comments on those individual trees. But that would allow folks to come up and testify. We received about 130 comments, which is probably the most comments I've ever seen on a type 2 tree application. So there's a possibility also that we're going to get a lot of public testimony this evening. And if we had to conduct two very separate hearings, that's going to prolong the process for the commission as well as the participants. And so it'd be more efficient if we could consolidate that. So that's a suggestion for you to consider tonight. The DRC does have the authority per the tree code it says that time limits on testimony shall be observed during a hearing conducted by a hearing body, subject to the right of the chair with hearing body consent to amend or waive the time limits. So the other thing that you might want to consider is the time limits that you want to have for individuals as well as the associations, whether you want to keep it at 5 minutes, even though there's technically two applications, or whether you want to make it reduce to say 3 minutes, or even, larger to, I don't know, 7 minutes. So that's something for the commission to think about. We don't know at this point how many people are going to testify, but again, considering the number of comments, it could be a lot. And I think Commissioner Silent had a question.
I do have a question, sort of procedural.
I think your mic.
Sort of procedural in nature. So it's two separate presentations having to do with two separate lots. They happen to be side by side. So we would then hear the presentation from the applicant on, let's call it lot 1. The other one we'll call lot 2 just for a moment. So we'd hear that presentation, and then in that process, we would hear testimony about lots 1 and 2, right?
No, you'd hear a presentation on lot 1 and lot 2.
Yes.
And then the public would be able to test.
I thought that it was being separated so that the
two staff reports.
Got it.
Okay, for you that, but it's going to be impossible to have people to say, stop talking about tree 5.
Yes.
Okay, wait 10 minutes.
I just didn't want it to be that we would hear the presentation for lot 1 followed by testimony about lots 1 and 2, and then we have to think back to what they said, and then we're doing lot 2. So I get it. We're going to hear presentation and presentation,
right,
and then the discussion.
You're going to get the planner's presentation about both lots.
Got it.
The applicant's presentation about both lots. That's right.
So Jessica and I were talking on the phone about this issue. Our thought was to take testimony from the public. When a person came up, his time would be for both lots. The arguments will be very similar for the, because the trees, we believe they will be very similar. So our thought process is that maybe we, hold the time limit for testimony of 5 minutes per individual and 10 minutes per neighborhood for both the lots. I mean, both lots together, you get 5 minutes. Otherwise, if we had 130 people.
And we're not saying that 130 people are going to show up, but we would expect a significantly
Let's say
more.
half.
Yeah.
Right. 20 people.
Say 50.
Yeah.
Question, is there any way that a plan like that could allow for an appeal? Or is it that we're going to take this action and this becomes the rules of the road, if you will, for that hearing?
The second, it becomes the rules of the road, and that's why we're asking you to make the decision ahead of time so we can put in the notice of what the limitation is, so people can file their written comments. You may get, they could file 100 pages, whatever they want to say, they can put it in writing. So that takes care of any due process rights to present their case.
They could also throw a stink up of what we decide. And
Yes.
And that they wanted 5 minutes on, for each. But that, I think we have control of that, and they could appeal that to the city council.
No, well, you can appeal anything, but I think with notice of the time limitations prior to the meeting, then any procedural prejudice has been cured by the opportunity to submit the written material.
Okay, very good.
And the applicant would similarly be limited to their 20 minutes. They wouldn't get anything more than they would for one application. And Evan, correct me if Mr. Boone, correct me if I'm wrong, the chair could, at his discretion, extend a time limit.
Well, you can with the consent of the commission. So I suppose if you start the meeting and it turns out there's only 10 people, if you want.
We could change it.
You can change it, but
the applicant would only get 20 minutes. That's it.
Right.
For both lots.
But you would extend time, if you're going to extend time, you would do it proportionally.
Right, but I mean, it wouldn't be fair to say the applicant had 20 minutes on each lot and then eliminate.
No, I'm saying.
So it'd be 20 minutes total for both.
20 minutes
Correct.
total,
Yeah,
right.
okay. So gentlemen, that's kind of where we're at. We were trying to be efficient. We're not trying to prevent anybody from testifying or limit what they say. We're just trying to be efficient.
I guess my question is it procedurally the reason that we're bifurcating it because theoretically we would approve lot one or lot two or not, or vice versa, or any mix of that? But if I'm talking about all these trees basically adjacent to each other, there's probably not a reason to talk 5 minutes about lot one and 5 minutes about lot two, because we're talking about basically all the same trees. Is that what I'm getting from this?
Well, it's the same issues on both lots. It's the same applicant on both lots. That it's the same stand type of trees. There isn't anything that differentiates the tree problem on either lot, but we have to look at each application separately.
I think would you agree, the comments, the written comments we received at this point have sort of commingled that. So in the public's mind, they're testifying on the project, which they see as the one developer with his 2 lots. So trying to separate that out. And of course, what we're talking about is it's a consolidated record of the testimony part, but you're right in that there's a separate decision for each because one could be appealed and not the other. So.
Well, and if you're not comfortable with that, wait, let me finish. If you're not comfortable with this, then my suggestion would be that we split these completely apart and we take one on a different night.
Well, that is a possibility. We do have a tight schedule, and we do have some very large projects coming up. So on July 6th, we have the Reseek Park, which we do expect a lot of public testimony on that.
Yeah.
We have the golf course on the second meeting in July, and then in the second meeting of August, we have the aquatic center.
But that we still don't want to be here all night is our point.
Jeff, you're making an assumption that the
Do you talk into the mic? I'm sorry, Commissioner.
You're making an assumption that the arguments about the trees on lot 1 and lot 2 are going to be the same arguments, and yet they may not be.
That's true.
So to me, it's a question of fairness. If the issues on one lot have only to do with the positioning of the building, proposed building envelope versus setbacks on the other lot, or, whatever, then it really is two separate arguments. So it becomes a question of,
Well, we have to kind of lean on staff on that, in that they've already seen the project.
I know, we haven't.
But I mean, they're
Are
telling
the
us,
arguments
we have to trust
similar
them that
enough
it's very,
to
very
say
similar.
that this is a no?
We have read all 130 comments.
And you've seen the application.
And we've seen the application. And I'm not saying that they're exactly the same, but the characteristics are significantly
Substantively the same.
And folks are making similar arguments and raising
Okay.
similar issues on both applications. But there are going to be some differences, sure, and people could certainly, certainly if they've heard other testimony that's repeated what they said, then they can focus in on,
They could
something.
spend 3/4 of their time on lot 1 and 1/4 of their time on lot 2, for
Or they
example.
could talk to their neighbor and they could speak.
Okay. I'm
Or they
just,
can put it in writing. Okay, I just want to, just
Right,
hit
that
that
too.
drum beat. Okay.
They can do both. They can put it
Yeah.
in writing and testify orally.
got it.
And we can always take a step back from the edge if we only have 5 people here that night.
I'm comfortable with consolidation and the way the staff has proposed it, because I'm not excited about 130 comments on 2 applications. I'm not interested in that, so.
Well, in any event, the staff will be doing separate reports, as I understand it, applying applicable criteria to each separate application for our analysis in advance. If we have questions, we can ask any witness a question if there's a distinction between the 2 lots, and that time answering the question isn't counted in their presentation time. So I think that's a good approach, particularly if we give notice in advance and emphasize they have the right to give their full statement in writing.
Okay. Do I hear a motion?
I move that we consolidate the 2 applications as previously explained to us by staff.
And can you address the time limits?
I propose that we put in the notice to the public that the typical 5 minutes per application, and is it 10 or 20 minutes for the applicant, whatever.
20 minutes for applicant, 5
is that-
minutes. That's what I'm showing.
That's your.
Yeah, right down here.
Oh, applicant have 20 minutes and parties have 5 minutes unless they're an association.
In which case they get
Thank you.
10.
For both.
For both lots, applications, yeah.
For both lots and applications.
I second the motion.
Thank you. Kat?
Shear,
Yes.
Arthur,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Silent,
Yes.
Guardy,
Yes.
Poinsett.
Yes.
Okay. So I think that's a good solution. And if it comes back and we see there's not very many people here, we can change our mind. Jessica, what else?
Nothing. As the counselor had pointed out, we are recruiting for boards and commissions. So if I have any updates, I'll let you know. I don't participate in the selection or interviewing, but as soon as I know something, I'll keep you guys up to date.
Okay, I had one more quick question that struck me on this application while we were sitting here. I saw in the review, I think they're gonna, aren't we putting a bike path down Pilkington? That showed they're spending $4.5 million on bike paths and there was a red line down Pilkington. Wouldn't that affect these trees? I didn't want to bring that up. Okay, never mind. All right.
Bike lane or is it a city?
City. Okay, never mind. Sorry I mentioned that. Okay, if there's nothing else, we are adjourned.
2 years ago.